Descriptive feedback is one of the strategies of formative assessment. It's one of the areas that research has shown, when done effectively, can really dramatically improve student learning. So effective feedback needs to be focused on what is to be learned, so our clear learning intentions. It needs to happen while our students are engaged in the learning. It needs to be in reference to criteria and or exemplars. So students need to know where they are in their learning compared to the criteria. And then the next aspect is it needs to provide students with next steps. How do they improve upon their learning? So there's an action piece to it. So we have a couple of kinds of feedback that we often talk about in education. There's the evaluative and the descriptive. Evaluative feedback are our grades, our gold stars, or when we're using words like approaching or not yet within expectations. And it has its place. And it's more about a snapshot of a student's achievement at that time. Descriptive feedback, when done effectively, can actually promote student learning. Not just capture student achievement, but actually promote student learning. And it's about what the student has said or done. And again, it gives that guidance for improvement, the next steps where a student could take their learning. So it's much more of that coach mentality. Here's 4 categories of evaluative feedback. And then this is just a quick snapshot of the comparison between descriptive and evaluative feedback. On the descriptive side, as at the bottom suggests, is that descriptive feedback really needs to cause the student to think. It's not providing them with all the answers. It's not circling their misused verb or their misspelled word or something in their science lab that they have done incorrectly. It is an indication of either something that they're working on that they're doing well at in reference to criteria, or something that needs improvement in reference to criteria, with then that action step. And that action step is a suggestion, and it's something the student would then employ. So at the bottom here in red is a good example of that descriptive feedback. So we have the first part of the sentence where it's a good introduction because you've covered the main points we discussed at the beginning. That's in reference to the criteria. That's telling the student where they are in relationship to the criteria and to the learning intentions. And then the next part of is our action, our next steps, something that the student can actually try and do that will improve their work. Interestingly, grades are not a motivator for most students. In fact, our top performing students in school often are the ones that are most restricted by grades. They're very afraid of losing their identity as getting high grades, and so they've learned how to play the game of school, and they don't want to jeopardize that. And grades then for our lower achieving or our meeting expectation students aren't a motivator. They don't have a framework of success, that they're never quite exceeding expectations. Descriptive feedback, on the other hand, really can encourage, it can help motivate, and it can help give students confidence. What it does when we think of our growth mindset is descriptive feedback lets us know that learning is incremental. It's about progression, and it's not about potential. So the kind of feedback that we give students is connected as well to where they are. If they're really struggling with something, then we're going to probably want to give just like a reminder prompt, something that is entry, basic, next level kinds of steps. And the article in the toolkit by John Hattie called Know Thy Impact under descriptive feedback goes into more explanation about these kinds of prompts. Here's some examples of our reminder or a scaffold or an example prompt. Activating students as resources for each other as well as for themselves is really going to help our students become self-regulated learners. And what it does when we engage them in giving themselves feedback or reflecting on their learning as well as giving feedback to their peers is it helps them know that they are capable of finding out things, of learning, and of problem solving. These 3 questions are just quick, easy ways of gauging whether or not the feedback we've given students has been effective. Often, we'll have spent hours and hours and hours going over our students' work and have written copious amounts of comments on their work. We hand it back, and the students just go to the last page or go to the bottom of the page and they look for the mark. And they ignore all the comments, all this time that we've spent giving them feedback on their work. Well, the research is pretty overwhelming that if there's a mark on there that, say it's a 9 out of 10 or it's a C plus, that's what they attend to, and they don't pay any attention to the comments. So when we give students a mark on one assignment, on their next assignment, there's no improvement. When we give them a mark as well as comments, same thing. But if we only give comments on the first assignment, on the second assignment, the average improvement is 30%. That's pretty significant. That is a statistically significant improvement. So if you're going to give a mark, save your time and don't put any comments on it. Clark, who has done much of this research, is actually Shirley Clark out of the UK, and this is a little bit of a synopsis of some of her findings. Self-assessment is a key part in helping our students be independent, self-regulated learners. We need to provide opportunity for our students to assess themselves in relationship to the criteria, just as we need to give them time to respond to the feedback that we've given them. So some couple of strategies that I like to use with students for self-assessment. One is called ping pong, and then the other is highlight and hand in. And so the criteria ping pong is just as it sounds. If I say have given my students a paragraph that they've been working on, and our learning intentions have been around using supporting details or details that support a main idea, I can ask them to highlight one supporting detail in one color and in another color highlight the main idea that it supports. If students aren't able to do that, that tells me that either one, they don't know the difference between a main idea and a supporting detail, or they don't have any supporting details. It also tells them that they're not quite ready to hand in this paragraph. So while walking around the room, I can have a quick chat with them, see where they are. Maybe they just need a little bit of direction on finding their detail, but it lets me know they still need a little bit more support on this. Another one that I like is the highlight and hand in, and it's, the criteria ping pong. And this one can be fun. Like, so say you're working on something that has a series of criteria, so you might have it as a checklist that I'm walking around the room, and maybe it's on a group working together, and I'm listening for how effective are they at listening. And we've got our checklist for what it means to be a good group member. And I walk by one group and I say, oh, I noticed that you're actually building on each other's ideas. And then they'll say back to me one of the other criteria that they're doing. And I'll go around to all the groups, same thing, and listen for some of the criteria, and then have them say back a criteria that they're noticed themselves doing. And that simple activity is actually helping them self-assess and peer assess and meaningfully use criteria in their own work. And it took no extra prep. It's actually a great way now for me when I think about the core competencies of the social and the personal that I now have more evidence that I can think about when I'm wanting to talk to my students about where they are, or they're wanting to talk to me about where they are in reference to those. So this is just an example, two examples of how you might structure the feedback that you give. As I mentioned earlier, it's key for us to give our students time to respond to feedback, and that response needs to be timely. It needs to be pretty quick after they've gotten that feedback. And if we aren't going to give students time, or if we can't give them the time to respond to feedback, then it's not really worth their while or our time to give them that feedback. This is one suggestion, way of having a feedback follow-up. And here is another. So in summary, here are some of the points around what makes for effective descriptive feedback.